Ruth Alderman stood in the empty living room, her footsteps echoing off walls that used to be covered in family photos, and realized she didn't feel sad at all. She was 66 years old, married to Jean for 38 of those years, and this was the last time either of them would stand inside the house on Birchwood Lane in Fenmore, the same 4-bedroom colonial where they'd raised 3 kids, hosted 38 Thanksgivings, and repainted the same hallway 4 different shades of beige. The house had been their whole life in a way. Jean built the deck himself the summer their youngest was born. Ruth had planted the maple in the front yard as a sapling. It now shaded half the street. Every room held something. A scuff mark from a bicycle indoors, a door frame with pencil lines marking height and age, a kitchen that had fed a family of 5, and then, slowly, fewer and fewer people each year, until it was just the 2 of them again, rattling around 4 bedrooms built for a family that had long since grown up and moved out. Neither of them talked about it much, but the house had started to feel too big, too much yard, too many rooms they didn't go into anymore. It started with a leak in the roof and a $14,000 quote to fix it. Jean sat at the kitchen table that night with the estimate in front of him, and instead of reaching for the checkbook, he asked Ruth a question he'd apparently been sitting on for a while. What if we just didn't? They listed the house 6 weeks later. Their kids assumed it meant a condo, maybe a retirement community. Nobody expected what came next. If you like stories about people rethinking what home is supposed to look like later in life, this channel has more of them. Hit subscribe so the next one finds you. Jean and Ruth bought 2 acres of land 20 minutes outside of town, mostly overgrown, with a view of the valley and nothing else on it. Their kids thought they'd lost their minds. Their son flew in from Denver just to try to talk them out of it. But Jean and Ruth weren't building another version of the old house. They built small, an 800-square-foot cabin with 1 bedroom, a wood stove, and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. No guest rooms, no formal dining room, no hallway to repaint. Jean put in a garden the size of their old living room and said it was the first thing he'd grown that wasn't grass he had to mow. Ruth got chickens, which she'd wanted since 1987 and never had room for. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was mornings with coffee on the porch instead of in a kitchen built for a family of 5. It was Jean, who used to spend Saturdays on house repairs, now spending them fixing fence posts and calling it fun. It was Ruth realizing she didn't miss a single room of that old house. Not really, because none of those rooms had ever been about the walls. They'd been about who was in them, and those people had just grown up and moved on, the way people do. When their kids finally came to see it, skeptical, a little worried, they found their parents happier and looser than they'd seen them in years. Their daughter said it best. You didn't downsize. You just figured out what you actually wanted the whole time. 38 years in one house taught Jean and Ruth what they didn't actually need, and it took 2 acres and a 1-room cabin to show them what they did. The house on Birchwood Lane has new owners now. Ruth doesn't think about it much. She's too busy watching the sunset from a porch that's exactly the right size. If you could start over with just what you actually need, what would you keep? Tell me below.